Welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher here with Drew Dinsick, recording on Sunday night during the second quarter of Rams-Lions. We're going to talk about the afternoon games today, the early games. We're going to talk about week 2 openers and then Monday Night Football to conclude. Let's start off with the 1 p.m., 4 p.m. games. Drew, what was your biggest takeaway?
Ooh, I only get one.
No.
I mean, I feel like we learned a lot today. I mean, the big questions coming into Sundays really, for me, all of revolved around quarterback play. What were we going to get? What were we going to see? How healthy is Joe Burrow? How healthy is Deshaun Watson? Like, these were the big questions, and we got, I think, some pretty Kirk Cousins, right? Like, these are three big time high leverage quarterbacks who we haven't seen play a lot in the preseason and are coming off of important, meaningful injuries. And I was dying to sort of see how they played out in real, game speed. And the answer was it was pretty unimpressive from the injured rusty guys. Burrow to me looks pretty limited from the wrist injury that he is recovering from. I didn't really know that was going to be a kind of a talking point this year, but I feel like that's notable since market and my numbers say that is a team that I thought was going to contend for an AFC potentially if the offense hit their stride, and they certainly did not today, and that was a little bit of a concern about specifically the performance from Burrow, and then even bigger alarm bells going off about Deshaun Watson. Really, just I know the Cowboys are a swarming defense. When things are going their way, they're bullies. It's not fun to play that team, but Watson I thought was pretty miserable today. And then Kirk Cousins I think looked pretty lost, even with very good protection and a bunch of weapons. He didn't necessarily look like he was up to game speed against the Steelers defense that absolutely came to play. And then you had the other side of the coin where some of these market moves really could not understand why there was so much interest in that under in Buffalo, and that thing cooked over. It didn't even need that kick return touchdown to get there. That was a dead nut over of a game. Similarly, did not really understand why there was so much enthusiasm for the Buccaneers Commanders under, as those are two pretty suspect defenses, and then the Buccaneers and Baker Mayfield I thought were absolutely crisp as can be today against the Commanders defense that is super JV type of vibe. And then the rookies all struggled, at least the ones that the big meaningful moments of the games. It looked like the game was still going a little bit too fast for them. And the other young quarterbacks outside of CJ Stroud I thought were a little bit underwhelming also. Didn't see the Jaguars offense I was hoping to see out there. The Titans and Will Levis folding after such a strong start to that game was pretty wild. Pretty inexcusable to give up a special teams and a defensive touchdown that decides that game for you if you are Tennessee. And then hat tip to the Patriots for finding a way to win after everybody is kind of saying you're not competing this year. They sure felt like they were competing in the first half. In particular, I thought that team was sharp, especially the defense. So not a lot of major changes for me, other than sort of solidifying some ratings on quarterbacks, particularly the guys who were injured, who we haven't seen, and the rookies who we expected to look a little behind the 8 ball, and I thought they did.
Did you have the pleasure of seeing Bryce Young play football today?
No, why would anyone watch that game? There was so much other stuff going on at 1 o'clock, Jay, that was so much better. The opening play or the opening pass for him being picked was just a disappointing process, sort of. Kind of this is really where he's at. Very, very tough to see how the Panthers do anything competitive. Similarly with the Giants, we knew it was going to be bad. I didn't think at home against a defense that doesn't have great coverage that they were going to look that inept offensively. But there was some pretty bad football from some of the bad teams today, and there were no units where I was like especially hope. Every unit that I had circled as like these guys could be quite bad. They turned out to kind of prove that today, I thought.
Do you think more or less of Chicago after what they served up today in terms of defense looked pretty good? I thought the offense looked a lot worse than expected.
Yes. I think that's the key takeaway, which is this is not hit the ground running for Caleb Williams. It's going to take him a little while to get up to NFL speed. And honestly, like a lot of what we saw with Caleb Williams in the preseason, to me, I didn't really like what Shane Waldron was like. His vision didn't really make sense to me in the preseason. I just kind of assumed, well, we're getting vanilla, so I'm not going to really be judgy about it. But after seeing it today, I mean, the Titans defense is a little. It's sneaky better than the market thinks. It's certainly not a bottom 10 defense by any stretch of the imagination. There are really good players on that team. But yeah, I think the Bears offense is going to take a little while before they get there. And a huge part of it, I thought, was the offensive line just has not come together yet.
Okay, let's flip it a little more positive. I think certainly relative to the spread, one of the biggest coverers was Minnesota beating the Giants 28-6 as 1.5 point favorites. Sam Darnold is 0.45 EPA per play against the Giants defense. I think is actually going to be, thought it was going to be somewhat competent. And the score is a little bit inflated because Ginkel has the interception touchdown. But Darnold 0.45 EPA per play. For context for people, like Brock Purdy led the NFL last year at 0.34. I think second in the league was 0.26. So Darnold, statistically pretty impressive. Do you chalk that up to the Giants defense being particularly underwhelming, or was Darnold and the Vikings, were they actually that good?
No, the Giants defense is not very good, particularly outside of that front four. And if the Giants defense is not getting consistent pressure because they're up against an equal strength offensive line, which the Vikings have, then they are very vulnerable. So I thought Darnold was fine. It is funny to me, though, that the 2018 draft class, reigning MVP Lamar Jackson, fourth best after Josh Allen and Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold. That's a little tongue-in-cheek, but he certainly had the least impressive week one, I thought, of those four guys. But yeah, Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold, all of a sudden, where are we? What's happening? These guys are two of your better quarterbacks week one. That's cool. But I think that actually is specifically a reflection of the Commanders' defense and the Giants.
Yeah. I think the Commanders might have, they might be vying with the Cardinals to have the worst defense in football. So I wouldn't read too much into Baker Mayfield looking like God out there. One game, keen for your thoughts on Raiders-Chargers, which is a weird game. Yeah. Raiders 2.5, 3-point type of dogs at close. The Chargers ultimately win fairly comfortably. They held the Raiders to 10 points. The Chargers defense is just kind of weird overall. They have a lot of star players. They have no depth. They have one cornerback who's not a superstar. Then they have two guys behind him who aren't amazing. Did you see anything from the Chargers that makes you reassess how good they might be? Because they have a really good schedule.
Yeah, that's the key, right? Like the Chargers might not lose other than those Kansas City games until like Thanksgiving. And they're not good. So I think it sets up for them to probably threaten playoffs with how weak their schedule is, considering they got this big high leverage win week one. And but I tend to think that this defense is certainly bottom half of the league. And I think the bigger story, a bigger takeaway from that game today was just that the offensive line is probably the best that Justin Herbert's ever played behind, at maybe the best they've had in going back to like the old school Phil Rivers days. But I thought that the Raiders offense is just wildly undercooked. Like that is a unit that it has not figured it out yet. And it's very unclear what they want to be identity wise. And I think I'm probably off Raiders games for a little while here, even though they did open as huge dogs against Baltimore, which is it's a tempting number because it's so big. But yeah, I was high on the Raiders relative to market. I didn't bet them, and I'm kind of feel like I dodged a little bit of a bullet there.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to work out. Dealing with injuries and the offense doesn't really seem to have a prayer. I would expect we see 2, maybe 3 quarterbacks at some point in Las Vegas this season. Before we move on to the openers, you've staked your good name to the Seattle Seahawks, who ultimately did it fairly comfortably against the Broncos. Bo Nix was not good. His stats were bad. I thought he was worse than his stats. He looked like he didn't belong out there. Maybe that's because of Mike McDonald's defense, but were you happy with what you saw from your Seahawks?
I was happy with the defense. I thought they played pretty well. One of the weirder anomalies, the Broncos managed to get to 20 points a very funny way with two safeties in that game and a bunch of field goals. But no, I thought the defense for the Seahawks looks like that is a unit that I could very clearly see being top 5 when the dust settles at the end of the year. And I'm dying to see them against a good unit. Right, like it's coming. We're going to get to see them tested, and I am very here for that. I thought the offense and Geno Smith looked nervous, maybe, and then he kind of settled into the game, and it was like, okay, this is going to be fine. The Broncos actually are not that hard to solve, and I thought, but I liked Grubb's scheme a lot. It was kind of a breath of fresh air when I've never really liked much of, sort of the Pete Carroll fingerprinty offense that the Seahawks have always run has always been a little bit underwhelming, and I liked. I thought Grubb looked pretty clean as far as a first game as a play caller at the NFL level.
Yep. I think you have to be pretty happy with what you saw from the defense. The offense didn't look amazing. I thought against a Denver defense, I'm not sure it's going to be very good overall. All right. It's a matchup between two of the brightest young quarterbacks in week 2 on Sunday night. Caleb Williams and the Bears face off with CJ Stroud and the Texans in Houston. Coverage begins at 7 p.m. Eastern on NBC and Peacock. Might be a rough initiation for Caleb Williams on primetime based on what happened today. The line in that game is Texans -6.5. The total is 46.5. We now have a full slate of openers, courtesy of BetMGM. Did anyone in particular leap out to you?
A couple I want to talk about, and maybe this is me being a little bit interested in the games that matter at first and foremost. Like, I'm just kind of curious. I was surprised they hung a Green Bay Colts number at all. I don't think we really have much clarity on who's going to start there. If that's Malik Willis, then is that a done deal? Because I know it's
kind of mooted.
Seems like it might be anyway. Integrating him and getting him into kind of ready to take on a feisty Colts team feels like that number could be a little on the short side, especially with the some of the travel fatigue potentially with the Packers coming back from quite a long trip to Brazil. The Bills Dolphins on Thursday night is fun to me. I'm kind of surprised that they opened this Dolphins favored. I didn't think the Dolphins looked especially good today. Their defense was very solid against a Jags team that was pretty clunky, but the offense really had a tough time with the Jags defense. And, the Bills, I thought, faced a very tough test in terms of going up against an offense with a bunch of size at the receiver and skill position group for the Arizona Cardinals. And speed, I think they can handle a little bit better than size. I thought Greg Rousseau was just phenomenal today, and he's going to be a huge problem against that very weak offensive line for the Dolphins. And I think the Dolphins opening up as dogs is wrong. I make Bills a small favorite there and very fired up for Thursday Night Football. And then I don't know. Do you feel the same way I do about whether it is reasonable to downgrade the Bengals based on the quality of performance of Joe Burrow at the quarterback position? Because coming into this season, week 1 ratings, I had them as basically quarterback OC combo I thought was top 3 in the NFL. And now I feel like it's maybe more middle of the pack with some of the limitations that we saw from him in terms of his ability to spin it. And I'm surprised I'm just kind of intrigued to see how much the market downgrades that team, not just because they lost at home in embarrassing fashion as a huge favorite and don't have a full, complement of skill position players. But the Burrow downgrade, I think, has to be real.
Yeah, the Burrow thing is weird because, he hurt his wrist. It's been a long time since he hurt his wrist. I assume that he's just going to come in and be full go for the season and just be, the Joe Burrow who gets the AFC title games and looks like the 3rd or 4th best quarterback in the NFL. And then I was listening to Nate Tice's podcast, Football 301, during the offseason, and Tice was like, I think there's a chance that Burrow might just be cooked physically.
Oh,
and I was like, wow.
I know.
Really? That wasn't on my radar at all. And then you watch him today and you get no T. Higgins, Chase, limited snap count and not fully up to speed. He still had like 6 for 65 or whatever. So I think that's a concern. I think the bigger concern, though, is that if Joe Burrow is not going to be Superman, like this defense isn't any good. Like the defense hasn't really been, it wasn't good last year at all. I'm not sure that they made like massively material upgrades to give you confidence that they're going to be much better this season. And I know that like the Patriots scored 16 points. It wasn't that it was amazing, but they're able to move the ball a little bit. And if the Bengals offense isn't going to be loaded and at full strength the way that it has been in years past, then they're in trouble. I think the one thing is that I don't really used to like to buy into this stuff, but like they always start off poorly, the Bengals, like every single year they're bad. So I don't know if that's just something like there are some baseball players who just consistently every year they start off poorly in April and then they get hot as the season wears on. Maybe that's just something with Joe Burrow and Cincinnati Bengals, but I would be a little bit concerned. But at the same time, Browns lose, look terrible. Ravens lose, look fine. Like no one thinks the Ravens are bad after that game or anything, but they had showed weaknesses on the offensive line. Steelers, if you're a Bengals fan, you wanted one team to win in the division. It's probably the Steelers, just given that they're rated the weakest team by market in that division. But yeah, I think they're a little bit of concern. Let's say with Chase when he gets fully up to speed and T. Higgins back at full strength before riding off the Bengals, but certainly some ominous, some warning signs so far. Question for you. After I watched an ungodly amount of Bryce Young today, how do you price this team now? Because that was the worst. It was actually kind of horrifying watching him play today and just watching him stare down edge rushers charging right at him for 1.5 seconds and just deciding, I'm just going to get sacked. I'm frozen, can't do anything, looking right at the guy, can't throw the ball away. It just seemed like he was like the who's the older guy in Any Given Sunday who mentors Jamie
Dennis
Foxx? Dennis Quaid. And when Dennis Quaid, it all speeds up for him too much at the end.
Yeah.
And it's he's seeing triple. That's what it felt like watching Bryce Young today. And the Chargers looked very good. And Justin Herbert is a good quarterback and Bryce Young is not. So should the Chargers be only 4.5-point favorites in Carolina?
Boy, I need to think about exactly how to price Carolina. They pretty clearly need to be the 32nd power rated team. But exactly how big is the gap between them and 31, which is probably the Giants? It's could be a pretty big gap. Bryce Young is not taken. And I guess here's maybe some general thoughts. There were two very distinct opinions of the Panthers coming into the season. One is literally hey, we're tearing Bryce Young down to the studs. We're going to build him up. We're going to build up his confidence. We're really going to make sure that he has a happy, comfortable, everybody's feeling good at camp. But that came at the cost of really not very physical camp. And I thought the team overall did not look ready to play football today. And the Saints did. And the Saints defense is a very tough ask to go against. They're very talented in the secondary, especially. And, the Superdome is never a fun place to play. It doesn't matter when you go or how good or bad the Saints are. That's a really tough, the real deal home field advantage there for New Orleans. And, I thought Bryce Young basically deserves enough for the quality of play we saw today. And some of that should be tacked onto the way they prepared for the season. Some of that is, kind of clear crystallizing of how to rate him going forward. But right now, I have not gone through and kind of updated with numbers and done any kind of upgrades, downgrades yet. We'll get to that. But, I thought that there was scope for this to be something like Chargers as 2.5-ish point favorites here. And the fact that it's already on the other side of 3, I think is a correct move and one that I don't have a ton of interest in really getting in front of, despite the fact that the Chargers offense is still pretty sus.
Yep, I think that's fair. Last one before we move on. He wasn't as bad as Bryce Young because no one can be as bad as Bryce Young was today. But I thought Bo Nix was kind of outlier bad against the Seahawks. And he is a 3-point dog at home against the Steelers. I thought the best player I saw playing football today was TJ Watt, who didn't show up on the stat sheet because he was everywhere. Kirk Cousins twice, and it didn't count either time. which was there was a suspect. I don't know, suspect. I wasn't watching closely enough, but he got called for jumping the snap. It seemed like it was a bang call, and then there was another one where I think the strip sack was just independent of the penalty called. So TJ Watt was like absolutely dominant. I think he moves into. Based on how bad Deshaun Watson looked, I don't think you can call Myles Garrett a tier 1 defensive player of the year guy right now, just because they're going to be, I haven't checked the price. I imagine they're like plus 250 to make the playoffs, that type of range now. And that's in a race. These races are usually close. And if Garrett doesn't make the playoffs, it's going to be pretty uphill for him to win that award. So I'd have Parsons and Watt as the top 2 guys. That's the chalkiest award in the world, by the way. It's like every year, like it was JJ Watt for a long time. Then it was Aaron Donald, JJ Watt, and, Nick Bosa and Garrett and Parsons, and you just don't get like random dudes like Trey Hendrickson winning Defensive Player of the Year. And not that Trey Hendrickson ever should have won, but you know what I mean. The Steelers are they're 3-point favorites. Bo Nix going up against that defense, and I get that the Steelers' offense didn't look good against the Falcons. We don't know if it's going to be Russell Wilson or Justin Fields, but I think that whatever they run out, just because of how they can run the ball and the fact that like if it's Fields, you get some rushing upside, and if it's Wilson, you get the competence of the 20th best quarterback in the league or whatever. And I just worry that Bo Nix isn't going to get past 14 points in this game against the Steelers defense.
Yeah, I make the game 3. It's a really tough place to go and play early in the season, going up to altitude when you're not in game shape yet. But I think that's probably going to be a hot side this week. Seeing that close 3.5 wouldn't shock me just because of what you mentioned, which is as people chew on the Bo Nix tape, they're going to be like, oh, he's not really ready to play. And now he's got to go against the Steelers. Like, yeah, there's a 1-2 punch there in terms of straightforward handicap that I think is going to make the Steelers a pretty popular bet, but I'm out because number 1, I think 3 is fair, and number 2, I don't love going against Denver early in the season, especially Steelers second week in a row on the road early in the season. They go to Atlanta, now go to Denver. A little bit of a what I would call a trappy spot, if you will, early in the season with the back-to-back road games and the altitude.
Yep, that is fair. All right. Dominate this NFL season with a Fantasy Life Plus subscription. Get weekly rankings, start sit advice, DFS analysis, and betting tools. Use promo code ROTO10 for 10% off. Go to fantasylife.com/RotoWorld to learn more.
As you all know by now, we've teamed up with BetMGM this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all our picks, and we'll have special offers for our listeners each week. If you haven't signed up to BetMGM yet, use bonus code BETEDGE, and you'll get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code BETEDGE. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you'll receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your first bet loses. Just make sure you use bonus code BETEDGE when you sign up. See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. U.S. promotional offers not available in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Available in the U.S. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369 in New York. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona, 1-800-327-5050 in Massachusetts, 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa, 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. First bet offer for new customers only, subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days in partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. Don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code BETEDGE and get your $1,500 first bet offer today.
Okay, let's close out talking about Monday Night Football. 49ers, 3.5-point favorites home to the New York Jets. The total is 43.5. Obviously, plenty going on in this game. Aaron Rodgers, presumably first full game as a New York Jet. Brandon Ayuk will play, but will be limited somewhat. Trent Williams allegedly just going to play the full game and be full go. I know that both of us were leaning towards the Jets when we spoke on Thursday evening when the line was 4 at 3.5. Any appetite for Gang Green?
Yeah, I think this is a lot. I mean, I just think this is going to be a very good close game. And I think there's a lot of reason to believe in upside for the Jets, not just this season, but certainly with this matchup. So I actually like Jets money line here. This is the best offense by my ratings in the NFL for the Niners against the best defense by my ratings in the Jets. And I have enough faith in what we've seen as you tease out sort of the splits for Brock Purdy in his young career, that he does not do great against especially dynamic coverage schemes and especially good secondaries. And I think in a lot of ways, his gaudy numbers, his EPA numbers, his just success numbers last year, hiding a little bit of the fact that he got very lucky on turnover-worthy plays not being converted to turnovers. And I'm not saying that the Jets will be able to turn him over multiple times in this game, but this is kind of the exact right recipe for expecting Niners to struggle going up against a team that is very complete, even in the absence of Hassan Reddick. And I think the Jets' offensive line being healthy throughout this whole preseason and what we've seen from them, particularly in their joint practices when they had their ones on the field, has me somewhat optimistic that they're going to be able to take advantage of a Niners team that really only has Nick Bosa going right now. I know Fred Warner is going to play, but he's been dealing with injuries. No Greenlaw, who matters a ton for that linebacking unit. No Hufanga, I believe.
He's a bit doubtful.
He's doubtful. And just in general, I think that the lack of a pass rush outside of Bosa is going to be a problem up against this strengthened offensive line for the Jets, which should give Aaron Rodgers time to, put a little bit of pressure on this Niners team. And excited to see Brock Purdy, if he's at a deficit in this game against a real deal defense. This isn't your Detroit Lions, defense, which, by the way, playing wonderfully right now for all of those on an under in just an absurdly high close for that total. But whatever the case is, this is a much tougher test than a lot of the comebacks we saw from Brock Purdy in high leverage games. And I'm happy to expect that the Jets can not just get a cover, and 3.5 is obviously on the right side of a key. So if you want to take the points, take the points. But I personally think that there's enough upside with the offense and some of the injuries that the Niners have sustained, some of their lack of being able to build chemistry in their camp from day one, has me expecting that there's going to be some rust. So, Christian McCaffrey may be a step slow. I'm not counting on that. But basically all of the question marks here tend to create uncertainty, which makes me think that the Jets money line is very live here. So, gangrene for me, and hoping that we can get a clean sweep in the AFC East.
Yeah, right. They all looked dicey at some point. I mean, the Patriots game looked dicey before the game started. Then started to look pretty good.
Dolphins surely should have lost. 14-point swing.
Looked bad. The Bills were down 17-3 or something. I imagine they had to have flipped dog in the market at that point. Could be 4-0 heading into the AFC East clash on Thursday night between Buffalo and Miami matchup, which, by the way, Buffalo destroys Miami every single time.
I don't know why they're Ducks.
So we'll see if they can maybe flip the switch. I think that people are buying a little bit too much into how good the Bills offense looked today. Like, the Dolphins don't have the best defense in the world, but they have a hell of a lot better defense than the Cardinals do.
That's true.
So we'll see how Keon Coleman and the fellas do against Jalen Ramsey and co. As far as this game goes, I have a unbaked theory about Brock Purdy, in that he is a quarterback who I've watched an ungodly amount of, given I've bet on him in various iterations, both of his seasons in the NFL so far. And I just think he's a quarterback who operates with extremely tight and narrow margins, where, close your eyes, picture what Brock Purdy does best. The throw that he does best, these timing patterns with Ayuk that go over the linebacker and before the safety. And these are extremely high margin difficulty throws, degree of difficulty throws. And so if just anything is slightly off, if there is anything off with perhaps the working of his brain, which seemed like was the case when he was playing concussed, I thought, for the 3 games last season in that middle stretch where they were losing to the Browns, Bengals, and Vikings. And then when he has been a little bit rattled in terms of what he's been seeing. And also whenever there's rain, he seems to rattle him as well. But I think back to the Baltimore game, where like a couple of those picks were tipped, but he also threw some balls that could have been caught as well that didn't get caught. And I just wonder, like, we haven't seen Purdy that much go up against elite defenses outdoors. The 2 times really that I thought he did it last year. And I'm not really counting the Cowboys as an elite defense, given what the Packers did to them in the playoffs, given what other elite offenses did to them in the regular season. So, like, he was awful against Cleveland in the rain, albeit he was missing guys in that game. And then more pertinently, he was terrible against Baltimore. And so now he goes up against the Jets, who may well be the best defense in football. And I think about if you want to tap into that, like Brock Purdy is plus 100 to throw an interception on Monday night. If you want to also like the idea that the Niners potentially are turning it over and they're rusty and Ayuk and Williams aren't up to speed and McCaffrey's coming off the soft tissue stuff, then I think also that ties into the fact that the Niners are last year they were, I believe, 26th in rush defense EPA. So I would think that if you're like building a story of the game, Niners rusty, Purdy turnovers, Jets with their healthy offensive line for now, at least, they emphasize the run. I thought it was interesting that this week so far, teams are really leaning on their number one running backs in terms of like rush share. Jonathan Taylor got 100% of the running back carries for the Colts. Saquon Barkley, 96%. Derrick Henry, 93%, even though he was off the field for passing downs. Mixon, 91%. Pacheco, 88%. Like, I think there's a good chance Breece Hall slots into that, and he's getting like 90% of the Jets' running back carries. He's set on MGM at 15.5 rush attempts. I would back the over on that. And that's kind of the way I see the game unfolding. Kind of ugly. Jets leaning on the run, Purdy a little jittery. But what do you think?
I think you said it quite well. I agree with that. And in general, I think this is going to be a pretty cagey tight game. I don't think this is going to be wide open, flying over the total type of stuff. And it's going to come down to kind of end of game execution. And yeah, the turnover worthy plays have been spooky from Purdy in general against elite defenses. And that's enough to tilt me into the money line here for the Jets.
We agree, which makes me sad because I like being on the side of Brock Purdy and Kyle Shanahan, but a little bit worried about this Niners team this year. As worried as you can be for the team that the market rates the best in the NFL effectively. But I do think there is a little bit more downside than your typical team. That I think a lot of the problems are, I think if you ask the casual NFL fan, like, how do you rate the Niners defense? And most people be like, yeah, it's an elite defense. It's like a top 5-6 defense. I look at this defense and it's like, who are the good players that we've got left here? Like Nick Bosa, clearly, Fred Warner, clearly, Javarius Ward. Like, who's next? Like, it's not, I mean, Jair Brown, safety, Lenore, outside, like, they're okay. Hargrave has his flaws, but is a plus player. Like with Dre Greenlaw out, I think the linebacking core around Fred Warner is not great. Like they got eviscerated on the ground last season. So I don't know. I'm a little bit worried about the Niners defense. And if it's not an all-world offense, then all of a sudden, like I think there are worlds where I guess the offense has to be pretty good. But if it's like the number 5 offense instead of the number 1 offense and it's a slightly below average defense, still looking at a playoff team, but not the all-world team that is right now like tier 1 to win the NFC by itself by market.
I think the arc for the Niners this year is going to feel very Billsian, like the last couple of years where the Bills found themselves in some real rock fights through the beginning and middle of the season, and then, you know, got better as they got healthier down the stretch. And are going to be probably a bye at some point this season, maybe like, I don't know, at or around the time they, they're coming out of their horrific stretch, Seattle, Green Bay, Buffalo, and into that stretch where they're home, 3 out of 4 weeks. And, they're up against some good teams, but teams that they can go shot for shot and potentially beat. So Niners, the right time to buy on the Niners is not right now. And I think there will be a day where we are very much banging on the table for it with how talented that offense is in particular.
Yep, indeed. All right. Don't forget to check out NBCsports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks to those watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, don't forget to rate and subscribe. Also a reminder to find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. For myself and Drew, we'll see you tomorrow.